Hey there, sleepyheads. Welcome back to the channel. Before we drift into tonight's tale of hidden dreams of the Chaos Emeralds, I'd love to know where in the world you are watching from tonight, and what time is it for you right now? Drop it in the comments below. It's always magical seeing how far and wide this sleepy little community reaches. All right, lights low, blankets up, let's begin. The universe began not with a bang, but with a single sound. A trembling note, a quiet vibration that drifted through a sea of nothing. It quivered like the breath before a melody uncertain, yet full of purpose. That note lingered, stretching itself across the dark until it became a line, a thread, a rhythm. And from that rhythm, the first pulse of life began to hum. The cosmos unfolded like a record spinning in slow motion. Each swirl of stardust struck another tone, soft, patient, endlessly repeating. And somewhere within the silence between notes, the world found its heartbeat. A light broke through the darkness. Not a blinding flash, but a shimmer blue, clean and free. It darted across the emptiness, laughing without sound, a spark made of motion. The spark became a streak, the streak a silhouette, and from that silhouette stepped the first runner. He was not born. He happened as if the universe itself needed a way to move, to feel, to go. Wind gathered around him like applause. Stars curved to his path. He did not ask where he was or why he ran running, was simply what he was made to do. Far away in the shadow of the same newborn stars, another figure stirred. Where the first was born of motion, this one was sculpted from silence. He rose from the dim horizon like a reflection half-formed darker, steadier, yet with eyes that shimmered like memory. If the blue one was the song's first verse, this one was its echo. They did not know each other yet, not truly. But the universe did. It saw them both light and shadow, rhythm and rest, chaos and control, and smiled quietly to itself. The first winds began to hum in patterns. The first waves began to crash in time. Planets tilted and gravity began its slow dance. From the tiniest sound came movement. From movement came story. And the story's name was Live Learn. The blue figure wandered across the still-forming lands. Mountains rose beneath his feet like the beat of a drum. He ran not to escape, but to explore, to test the song that pulsed in every living thing. Wherever he went, color bloomed. The grass glowed in soft turquoise, rivers shimmered with streaks of cayenne. He laughed when the wind caught him off guard, a laugh that made the world brighter. His joy was contagious, pure, unafraid. To him, life was an open track, and the horizon was not an end, but an invitation. The other watched in silence from afar. He studied how the blue one moved, effortless, confident, free. But within that freedom, he saw something fragile, a carelessness that came from not knowing pain. He looked at his own hands, made of shadow and memory, and wondered, was stillness also a kind of strength? When they finally met, the universe held its breath. It happened in a place between dawn and dusk, where colors mixed into violet haze, and time moved like smoke. The ground beneath them shimmered like the surface of a dream. The blue one grinned first, his energy bright and easy. "Hey there," he said softly, his voice carried on the wind. But the shadow said nothing. He only tilted his head, studying the mirror that fate had drawn for him. For a long while, neither spoke again. The world around them seemed to listen, curious. Two beings, one of motion, one of restraint, both born from the same note, now face to face. Then a spark, not of anger, but of recognition. The shadow raised a hand, and the air around him rippled. Gravity seemed to bend. Sound seemed to warp. The blue one took a step forward, felt the pull, and smiled wider. "Oh, so you can dance," he whispered. And they did. Not a fight, not yet, more like two waves colliding, learning how to exist beside one another. Every movement struck invisible chords that echoed through the forming sky. the first guitar strings of the universe. Their clash painted the heavens, bursts of blue and streaks of black, twisting in harmony. The song of creation was no longer a whisper. It was alive, growing, pulsing with energy. When at last they stopped, the world around them had changed. There were rivers where their footsteps crossed, canyons where their power struck, and stars burning where their gazes met. They had shaped the world by simply being themselves. The blue one looked at the horizon, then at his reflection in the shadow's eyes. "You're not bad," he said. "A little quiet, but I like that." The shadow didn't reply, but something in him softened the faintest curve at the edge of his mouth, a flicker of understanding. Perhaps the song needed both of them, after all. Days became ages. Ages became myths. The blue one ran across continents, his footsteps a blur of life. Everywhere he went, he left behind pieces of the melody, the tone of freedom, the rhythm of courage, the harmony of heart. The shadow wandered beneath the stars, tracing the edges of night. He learned to listen to the way silence could hold meaning, to the way stillness could speak louder than sound. He carried his own melody too, deep and steady one that spoke of patience, of purpose, of strength born from loss. And somewhere in the distance between their paths, the song continued to grow. It wasn't sung by mouth or instrument, but by existence itself. Every gust of wind, every ripple in water, every heartbeat of the planet carried fragments of their symphony. Live and learn was becoming more than music. It was becoming the law of life. The world matured with them. Civilizations began to rise, crafted by beings who unknowingly echoed the duality of their creators. Some built cities of speed and innovation, chasing the thrill of the horizon. Others built sanctuaries of reflection and knowledge, protecting the wisdom of stillness. Together, these societies created the culture of movement and memory, the dance between doing and understanding. Every festival, every drumbeat, every whispered prayer contained a faint remnant of that first chord. In the temples of the northern winds, monks spoke of the first sonic, the embodiment of motion, the sacred rhythm of the soul. In the cathedrals of night, sages whispered of the shadow guardian, the keeper of balance, the protector of silence. Neither story was wrong. They were two halves of one truth, to live and to learn. Over time, the song began to change. Its tones grew richer, its patterns more complex, like a river meeting the sea. The people of that age began to craft instruments that could almost imitate the sound they heard in dreams. Strings, flutes, drums, attempts to capture what creation itself had played first. And when they played, something beautiful happened. The blue wind would stir once more. The dark horizon would flicker with light. Somewhere unseen, two ancient souls would listen, smiling, their melody reborn through the hands of others. For in the end, they understood. They were not gods, not rulers, not myths to be worshipped, but lessons to be felt. The universe did not ask for perfection, it asked for motion. It asked for growth. It asked gently that every being remember the rhythm within them, the one that says fall, rise, fall again, but keep learning. That was the secret the song carried through eternity. Live Learn was never meant to end. It was a promise, sung in every heartbeat, whispered in every fall, echoed in every second chance. And as the stars turned once more above that newborn world, the two figures met again, one glowing like dawn, the other deep as twilight. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The air between them hummed with memory. The strings of creation still trembled. The song was still playing. And somewhere deep within the rhythm of the universe, something new was beginning. The world was still young when they began to drift apart. The blue one chased the horizon, eager to see what lay beyond each sunrise. The shadow remained behind, tracing the edges of the night, watching, wondering what purpose awaited him in the silence. But though they walked separate paths, the song tethered them an invisible thread, that pulled tight whenever the world lost its balance. It wasn't fate, it wasn't destiny, it was simply harmony. For every burst of speed, there needed to be a moment of rest. For every rise, a pause. The universe required rhythm, and they were its first measure. Across the plains of the dawn, the Blue One found new shapes of life forming. Creatures of light and dust, curious and uncertain. They watched him as he passed, marveling at the wind that followed in his wake. When he smiled, they felt joy. When he laughed, the air around them shimmered. And when he leapt into the sky, they felt something stir inside the courage to move, to try, to exist. He became a myth without meaning to. The children of that first world spoke of him as the runner of dreams, the one who carried the laughter of creation on his back. He didn't stop to listen. He didn't need to. The sound of their wonder was already music. Far beneath the same sky, the shadow watched the reflection of stars ripple across a black sea. He saw their light bend and twist across the surface, so beautiful, yet so fleeting. He reached out to touch the reflection, and it scattered. 1,000 tiny lights dissolving in his hand. He sighed softly. Was his existence only to watch, to be the echo, the afterthought, the still point in someone else's song? But even as he thought this, he heard it again, faint, gentle, undeniable. That trembling chord, the one that had birthed them both. It called to him, not as a command, but as a reminder. The universe did not create one for glory and the other for shadow. It created them to understand each other, to remind all things that speed without purpose was chaos and stillness without reason was despair. He closed his eyes. When he opened them again, the sea reflected not the stars, but his own calm resolve. He smiled faintly. If he was to be shadow, then he would be the kind that gives shape to light. Ages passed in moments, as time often does in stories too big for clocks. The world ripened, layered with stories and symbols. And somewhere in the middle of everything, between the pulse of wind and the hush of twilight, the song continued to evolve. It no longer lived in sound alone. It moved through people, through emotion, through connection. Those who ran and those who rested all carried a little piece of it inside. Some felt it as a spark and urge to leap, to break boundaries, to dream faster. Others felt it as calm a pull toward reflection, wisdom, patience. Both were right. Both were learning. In a valley surrounded by sapphire rivers, a group of travelers gathered one evening to tell a story. They spoke of two beings, one who carried the wind and another who guarded the silence. They said the two had met before the first dawn and shaped the rhythm of life. Their song was eternal, woven into everything that lived. The travelers passed the tale along the ages, never knowing its truth but always feeling its warmth. Each retelling changed something. The details blurred, the names forgotten, but the feeling stayed. It was hope. It was motion. It was the knowledge that every fall carried the promise of getting up again. And so when the world faced its first darkness, when the stars began to fade and the rivers stopped singing, it was that feeling that called them back. The Blue One heard it first. He felt the stillness in the air, the weight of something unbalanced. Without hesitation, he ran. The land beneath him was tired. Flowers hung their heads, mountains bowed under invisible weight. The wind no longer whispered songs, it sighed in exhaustion. He ran faster, hoping to stir the rhythm again. But no matter how hard he moved, the melody did not return. The world had forgotten how to listen. Then through the quiet came a voice, calm, low, familiar. "You can't fix silence by shouting at it," said the shadow. The Blue One turned. The figure emerged from the darkness, serene and sure, like midnight given form. The Blue One frowned. "You've been hiding again." "I've been waiting," the shadow replied. There's a difference, Warren. They stood facing one another beneath a colorless sky. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence was heavy, but not hostile. Then the shadow said, "The song doesn't need to be louder. It needs to be remembered." They sat together on the edge of the fading world. No words, no arguments, just presence. The shadow closed his eyes and began to hum a low, resonant tone that echoed through the air like ripples in still water. The blue one listened. At first he didn't understand. Then he began to tap his foot in time, adding rhythm to the hum. One note became two. Two became a chord. And slowly the world began to breathe again. Rivers stirred, clouds gathered. A faint glow returned to the horizon. The silence was still there, but now it was no longer empty. It was part of the song. They realized something profound that night. Creation was not about noise or quiet, light or dark, running or standing still. It was about the balance between them. Without stillness, movement was meaningless. Without movement, stillness was void. The universe thrived on the tension between both. The blue one laughed softly. "Guess that means we're stuck with each other." The shadow smiled, almost imperceptibly. Balance has its price. They looked out at the reborn world, brighter now, steadier, humming softly in tune with the rhythm they'd restored. It was the first lesson, the first truth, the first verse of Live Learn. In the centuries that followed, stories of that night spread like wind through grass. Artists carved spirals into stone symbols of eternal motion. Poets wrote verses about the dance of light and shadow. Musicians plucked at strings, trying to echo the hum of creation itself. Some claimed that when you struck the perfect note, you could hear it the faint trace of two souls running across the sky, laughing together, bound by a song older than time. And perhaps somewhere deep down, they were right. One evening, when the sun dipped low and the world was bathed in orange light, the blue one stood atop a cliff overlooking the ocean. Waves crashed in rhythm below him, endless and alive. He could feel the pulse of everything, the song, the people, the stars. He smiled, then whispered, "We did good, didn't we?" From the horizon, a voice answered, carried by wind. "We're still learning." The blue one chuckled softly. "Guess that's the point." The wind shifted, the ocean shimmered. And for just a moment, two silhouettes appeared in the twilight, one glowing like the sky, the other deep as space. They nodded to each other, no rivalry, no resentment, just mutual recognition. Then they vanished into the rhythm again. The song of Live Learn didn't belong to either of them anymore. It belonged to the world, to every soul who dared to grow, to stumble, to get up again. It lived in the laughter of children chasing dreams, in the quiet prayers of those waiting for tomorrow, in the echo of footsteps walking new paths. It lived in failure, in courage, in forgiveness. It became the unseen melody that carried life forward, sometimes loud, sometimes faint, but always there. And as the centuries folded into one another, the song remained, its chords woven into the very structure of existence. Even when people forgot the myths, even when names faded from memory, the music lingered. Because the lesson was eternal. Every being, every choice, every mistake, all were part of learning how to live. In the far reaches of the universe, a new world began to form. Its surface glowed faintly blue, its heart pulsed with warmth. Somewhere within that forming planet, a spark of speed stirred. And not far behind, a ripple of shadow followed. The cycle had begun again. No composer wrote this melody. No singer performed it. It simply existed, a memory older than thought, humming quietly in the corners of creation. It would continue forever, shifting, adapting, learning with each new age. Because Live Learn was not a song, it was the soul of motion itself. The promise that every fall would be met by a rise, that every silence would someday sing again. The stars burned brighter that night, their light weaving through the fabric of time. The universe itself seemed to listen, swaying gently to a tune that no one could hear but everyone could feel. And somewhere within that infinite rhythm, within every dream, every heartbeat, every quiet act of courage, the story still played. The tale of two forces that once met in the silence, and together taught existence how to move. The strings of creation trembled once more, not with chaos, not with noise, but with understanding. And in that sacred vibration, the cosmos whispered back the words it had carried since the very beginning: live and learn. The night deepened over the shattered cliffs of Space Colony Ark. Above the Earth, the endless void shimmered with fractured light, the same light that once carried dreams of progress, now reduced to silent memories drifting in orbit. Amid the echoing corridors and flickering control panels, a single figure stood at the edge of the glass observatory. Shadow the Hedgehog. His crimson eyes reflected the fading planet below, a world he had both loved and hated. The hum of ancient machinery filled the chamber, whispering like ghosts of the past. Every sound carried history: Gerald Robotnik's research notes, Maria's laughter, the promise of salvation that turned into vengeance. And now, in the silence between stars, Shadow could still hear it faint, distant, the melody. Live and learn. The song was faint, almost unreal. Not in words, but in essence a rhythm pulsing in the same frequency as the Chaos Emeralds themselves. Shadow closed his eyes. He could feel the resonance moving through his quills, that same strange heartbeat that once united him. And sonic, two forces opposite yet equal: light and shadow, chaos and control. Their rivalry wasn't just battle, it was balance. As the memory unfolded, time slipped away. A flash of white, the arc collapsing, alarms screaming, Sonic reaching out through the explosion. Shadow, let's finish this together. That moment replayed endlessly in Shadow's memory, not for the fight, but for the understanding it held. Sonic wasn't just an adversary, he was the reflection of everything Shadow denied: freedom, hope, forgiveness. The chaos control that saved Earth didn't just merge space, it merged hearts. Two consciousnesses, two destinies, momentarily intertwined through a shared pulse of determination. And in that cosmic instant, the lyrics of Live Learn became more than a battle cry. They became prophecy. Far below, the Earth rotated in silence, carrying civilizations unaware of how many times they'd been saved. The winds moved across Angel Island, through Green Hill's endless loop-de-loops, through Station Square's now rebuilt skyline. But beneath all that, something stirred. A vibration. A call. It wasn't just sound. It was an ancient frequency that predated even chaos, something tied to the world's core. Sonic felt it first. He was running across a moonlit ridge near Emerald Coast when he suddenly stopped, his ears twitching, his quills bristling. The air shimmered faintly, like the ocean holding its breath. "What was that?" he whispered. The sound was faint, not quite music, not quite static, a pulse that aligned perfectly with his own heartbeat. It was the same rhythm he had felt years ago during the final battle on Ark. Tails, who was nearby working on the Tornado's flight calibration, noticed Sonic's stillness. "Something wrong, Sonic?" Sonic grinned faintly but didn't answer right away. He tapped his chest lightly. "You ever feel like the world's singing?" Tails blinked. "Singing?" "Yeah," Sonic said softly. "Like the planet itself. Not just noise, but meaning. Kind of feels like it's humming the same tune as..." He trailed off. Tails tilted his head. "As what?" Sonic smirked. "As live and learn." Deep beneath the planet, beyond the crust and mantle, there existed structures unknown to most remnants of the first civilization. They were the architects of the Chaos Emeralds, the ones who understood how sound and emotion shaped energy. To them, music wasn't art, it was power. Every Chaos Emerald vibrated at a different frequency, one for courage, one for sorrow, One for love, one for rage, one for peace, one for memory, one for creation. When aligned perfectly, their resonance formed a song, the harmonic equation of existence. That equation was what Sonic and Shadow unknowingly activated during their final chaos control. It didn't just save the world, it awakened a dormant harmony buried deep in the planet's heart. And now that harmony was reawakening. On the floating ruins of the Ark, Shadow stood before a dormant terminal. The machine flickered to life, displaying an encrypted message in Gerald Robotnik's old handwriting. Project Harmony. When frequencies align, consciousness transcends time. Shadow frowned. Transcend time? He muttered. The word transcend echoed in his mind not as science but as emotion. What if their connection through chaos control wasn't temporary? What if the resonance between Sonic and Shadow had created something lasting, a bridge between two consciousnesses across realities? He clenched his fists. If that's true, then he's hearing it too. Meanwhile, miles away, Sonic raced through the jungle of mystic ruins. The sound that pulse was growing stronger. It wasn't random. It was guiding him, syncing perfectly with every stride. Faster, faster. Each step matched the invisible rhythm until he reached an open clearing bathed in moonlight. At the center lay something glowing, a fragment of a chaos emerald, cracked but alive, humming with energy. Sonic knelt down and touched it. Instantly, memories flooded through him, not his own, but Shadow's. He saw flashes of Maria, of cold metal corridors, of grief and longing that burned brighter than any chaos blast. Sonic gasped and stepped back. What the Shadow? The emerald pulsed once more, sending a burst of energy upward. The forest shimmered, the stars blurred. For a second, Sonic saw two worlds overlapping, one light, one dark, both existing side by side. It wasn't an illusion, it was resonance. In the darkness above, Shadow also saw something, a ripple through the void, like two dimensions brushing against each other. He looked up, and in the reflection of the Ark's glass, he swore he saw Sonic not as a memory, but as if standing right there beside him. Guess I'm not the only one hearing the music, Sonic's voice echoed faintly. Shadow didn't respond aloud, but his chest tightened. The connection was real. Through the chaos resonance, they were seeing fragments of each other's worlds, and the melody binding them was growing louder. But there was something else in the harmony, a discord, faint yet sinister, buried within the frequencies, a shadow behind the shadow. The next day, Tails analyzed the cracked emerald fragment. His scanners went haywire, readings spiked between impossible values, the energy patterns looping like verses in a song. It's weird, he said, turning the screen towards Sonic. This fragment isn't decaying like normal chaos energy. It's evolving. The waveform keeps adjusting to match external sound. Sonic crossed his arms. Meaning? Tails frowned. Meaning it's listening to us. Sonic tilted his head. Listening? Yeah, it's absorbing emotion through sound like it's attuning itself to whoever's near. And right now, he pointed at the waveform. The display flickered, forming a pattern that looked strangely familiar. It's copying your heartbeat. Sonic's grin faded slightly. Huh, guess it really does like me. But inside, he felt something deeper, a pull. Not of danger, but of destiny. That night, Sonic sat by the edge of Emerald Coast, the broken fragment resting beside him, glowing faintly blue. The waves shimmered under the starlight, and the world felt peaceful, too peaceful. He leaned back and stared at the moon. You still out there, Shadow? He murmured. Far above, on the Ark, Shadow stood by the same observation glass, gazing at the same moon. Always, he whispered. At that moment, both felt the same pulse, soft, rhythmic, unmistakable. The song began to hum again, this time clearer than ever. Live and learn, hanging on the edge of tomorrow. But this wasn't memory. It was prophecy sung not from speakers or voices, but from the emeralds themselves. The harmony rippled through space, reaching both of them simultaneously. And from the deepest part of the cosmos, something stirred an echo long dormant, older than chaos, older than the ark. An intelligence woven into the emerald's song itself. Its voice was not words, but vibration. And it said, when the final note fades, the world resets. Both Sonic and Shadow froze, hearing it in unison, across light and darkness. The realization struck like lightning. Live and Learn wasn't just a song, it was a cycle. Each time the world faced ruin, the same melody reawakened, urging its heroes to rise again. It was the Earth's heartbeat, teaching through rhythm and struggle. Shadow's eyes narrowed. So, we're trapped in melody. Sonic stood, clenching his fists. Then let's rewrite the song. The waves crashed harder, glowing faintly with chaos energy, as the moon pulsed like a giant metronome. The rhythm was changing. The pulse continued long into the night. It wasn't a sound that could be heard in the usual sense, not through ears, but through existence itself. Everything vibrated in sync. The tides, the leaves, even the starlight above. The planet was alive in rhythm, and Sonic could feel it moving through him like a living memory. He rose to his feet as the glow of the cracked emerald beside him intensified. For a moment, he thought he saw something reflected in the ocean's surface, not himself, but a distorted image of Shadow, staring back through ripples of blue light. "Still keeping watch, huh?" Sonic whispered, with a faint grin. "Guess the universe just won't let us nap." The reflection didn't answer, but the silence that followed was loud enough to carry meaning. High above, Shadow stood motionless inside the Ark's observation dome. The hum beneath his boots was no longer mechanical. It was organic, pulsing like the heartbeat of something ancient. His communicator blinked. Rouge's voice crackled through. "Shadow, you might want to see this. The data I pulled from the old ARC archives, it's reacting to lunar frequencies." "Lunar frequencies?" "Yeah, specifically tied to Earth's magnetic harmonics. The readings match the resonance pattern you mentioned, that same frequency that's been, well, following you." Shadow's grip on the console tightened. "It's spreading then. Not just spreading, it's synchronizing. The entire planet's aligning to one rhythm." He turned toward the glass. Below, Earth shimmered faintly with Aurora's bands of light stretching across continents like strings on a cosmic instrument. At the same time, deep in the mystic ruins, Knuckles felt tremors rolling through the Master Emerald's altar. The great stone began to hum, its surface splitting with geometric lines of light. He placed his hand on the gem. "Hey, easy there. What's going on with you?" The energy swirled around him, forming images, fragments of the ancient Echidna civilization. He saw warriors kneeling before the Chaos Emeralds, chanting not prayers, but notes. Music, the first language. He saw them forge balance between chaos and order through sound, and when that balance broke, the world was remade, over and over. Knuckles drew back in awe. It's happened before. Back on the coast, Tails' scanners screamed with overlapping frequencies. "The resonance is hitting critical alignment," he shouted. "Sonic, whatever this is, it's not just global. It's cosmic." Sonic kept his gaze fixed on the horizon. The cracked emerald was glowing brighter than ever. "Then maybe it's time we answered it." Before Tails could respond, Sonic placed his hands on the fragment. Chaos energy burst upward, surrounding him in a swirling sphere of light. The air fractured like glass. One moment he stood on the beach. The next, the world around him dissolved into shifting streaks of gold and black. When the light settled, he stood inside a place that wasn't Earth or any world he'd known. The sky was a canvas of moving color, the ground translucent like crystal, and every breath carried faint echoes of the same melody, Live and Learn, drifting through infinite space. Shadow appeared a heartbeat later, his boots landing softly on the crystalline floor. The two hedgehogs looked at each other, not with surprise, but recognition. "So," Sonic said, "we both followed the beat." Shadow folded his arms. Looks like the rhythm wanted a duet. Sonic chuckled. Then let's make it count. They stood in silence for a moment, watching light cascade from the sky. In front of them stretched a massive structure, ancient yet alive, a cathedral of sound. Towers rose like tuning forks, and every vibration sent ripples through the air. At the center floated 7 spheres, the Chaos Emeralds rotating slowly in perfect harmony. But one thing was wrong. The blue emerald, the same color as Sonic's aura, flickered irregularly. Its energy pulsed offbeat, slightly discordant. Sonic frowned. That's the crack, the fragment I found. Shadow studied it. Then this is the source of the dissonance. The balance isn't complete. The air trembled. The music warped. From within the light, a figure began to take shape. Not flesh, not spirit, but resonance incarnate. It spoke in layers of voices, each one harmonizing with the next. Children of chaos, you awaken the unfinished song. Sonic and Shadow exchanged a glance. This melody, the voice continued, is the cycle of your world. Each era, the harmony breaks and the chosen rise to restore it. You have done so countless times, never knowing the rhythm repeats. Shadow's eyes narrowed. You mean we're caught in some eternal loop? A loop of learning, a rhythm of rebirth. The song Live and Learn is not mere anthem, it is instruction. To live is to repeat. To learn is to change the note. Sonic stepped forward, defiant. Then maybe it's time to hit a new chord. The entity shimmered. To change the chord is to risk silence. The balance exists because you exist in opposition. Should one fade, the song collapses. Shadow's voice was low. So if one of us ends, the melody ends with us. Yes, that is the weight of duality. The world pulsed violently, the colors shifting into chaos. The emerald's orbit destabilized, the dissonance growing stronger. Sonic clenched his fists. If we're repeating history, then maybe that's the test, not to destroy, but to rewrite. The entity's form wavered. For the first time, its harmony faltered. Rewrite? Yeah, Sonic said, stepping closer. You said every world's been reset, right? Every era plays the same song. Maybe we've learned enough to make our own melody, one where the balance doesn't need pain to exist. Shadow's eyes met his. There was something unspoken there, a shared understanding born from every battle, every sacrifice. Then let's compose it, Shadow said. The two extended their hands toward the 7 emeralds. Energy surged, light spiraling into infinity. Their consciousnesses collided with the planet's core. Memories flooded not just theirs, but from civilizations long gone. Mobians of ancient temples, human inventors, even chaos himself, all repeating the same cycle of rise, fall, rebirth. The song Live and Learn echoed faintly, but this time the lyrics shifted not in words, but in feeling. Where once there was defiance, now there was peace. Sonic felt the rhythm change, like a heartbeat softening after a long sprint. Shadow's energy intertwined with his, red and blue light spiraling into white. The dissonance faded. The cracked emerald repaired itself, glowing pure again. For a moment, all was still. Then the entity's voice returned softer, almost human. You have done what countless before could not. You listened. The world began to dissolve around them. Go now. Let the new harmony play. When the light faded, Sonic opened his eyes to the familiar sands of Emerald Coast. The waves rolled calmly, as if nothing had happened. Beside him, the emerald fragment now gleamed whole. He smiled faintly. Guess the song's got a new verse. A shadow passed overhead literally. Shadow the Hedgehog landed beside him, silent as ever. So, Sonic said, stretching, you still think we're just rivals? Shadow glanced at him. No, rivals don't build worlds. They keep them turning. Sonic laughed. Guess we both keep the beat, huh? Shadow's faint smirk said more than words. Far across the planet, the auroras faded, the tremors ceased, and the master emerald's hum settled into a peaceful vibration. Knuckles watched the light dim. Looks like the world's finally at rest. Rouge's voice echoed through the communicator. You sure it's over? Knuckles nodded. For now. But the rhythm never really ends, does it? Maybe not, Rouge said. But maybe this time, it'll play a little sweeter. In the skies above, Tails' radar displayed a strange new reading, a subtle, repeating pattern hidden in the Earth's magnetic field. It wasn't dangerous. It was musical. He smiled softly. A new harmony. Night fell once more. Sonic stood on a cliff overlooking the sea, the stars bright above. The ocean shimmered faintly with light, each wave moving in rhythm with his heartbeat. He whispered quietly, "To live and learn, huh? Guess we're still learning." Behind him, the wind carried faint laughter, not from this world, but from memory. Maria, perhaps, or the echo of those who came before. Shadow appeared beside him, arms folded, gazing at the horizon. The song's quieter now, he said. Yeah, Sonic replied. Maybe that's a good thing. Every tune needs silence to grow. Shadow nodded once. Until the next verse. The two stood side by side as the first light of dawn broke across the ocean. The earth breathed in rhythm, not of conflict, but of calm. For the first time in countless cycles, the song did not end in destruction. It ended in harmony. And somewhere, deep within the planet's heart, the Chaos Emeralds hummed their eternal refrain, not as warning, but as memory. The stars had never looked brighter. Each one shimmered like a note suspended in endless darkness. A silent orchestra spread across the cosmos. The world below had found calm again, but calm never lasts forever in a universe built on rhythm. Sonic lay on a grassy hill near Emerald Coast, hands behind his head, eyes half closed. The soft hum of the ocean below blended with the whisper of wind through the palm trees. For once, everything was still. No enemies, no battles, no time limits. Just the afterglow of peace. But even peace has a pulse. The ground vibrated faintly, not enough to alarm, just enough to remind. The earth itself still hummed the new melody he and Shadow had written. The harmony was subtle, alive, breathing. Sonic exhaled. So this is what harmony feels like, he murmured. Not bad. A soft beep came from his communicator. Tails' voice crackled through, cheerful but edged with curiosity. Hey, Sonic, you awake? Barely, Sonic said, smirking. What's up, buddy? I've been monitoring the emerald frequency since you and Shadow fixed the dissonance. Something weird's happening. The signal's not just local anymore. Sonic's eyes opened. Not local? Yeah, it's bouncing off the atmosphere. There are return waves coming from deep space. It's like the song's echoing back. Sonic sat up. You mean someone or something is singing along? Maybe. Whatever it is, it's ancient. The signal matches pre-recorded chaos readings from before the Echidna era. You might want to come take a look. Sonic stood, brushing off the grass. The night breeze carried faint energy through the air. The melody was still there, faint but constant. And now a second rhythm joined it, distant, irregular, like an old song remembering its own voice. Got it, Sonic said. I'm on my way. Half an hour later, Sonic arrived at Tails' workshop. The place buzzed with machinery and the scent of metal warmed by electricity. Screens flickered with patterns of sound waves, pulsing in light blues and greens. Tails pointed at one display. Here, look at this. The screen showed two frequencies. The first was smooth and familiar, the Earth's new harmony. The second was jagged, older, trying to sync with it. It's like an echo, Tails explained, but it's not reflecting. It's responding. Sonic tilted his head. Responding how? By matching rhythm. It's not random static, it's structure. Someone out there understands the same harmonic code as the Chaos Emeralds. Before Sonic could respond, the lab lights dimmed. The waveform on the screen spiked violently, turning crimson. Tails gasped. It's locking onto us! A beam of golden light burst from the scanner, striking the floor. The air shimmered, swirling into a sphere of liquid sound. Inside it, shapes began to form ancient glyphs, symbols of the first civilization. Then a voice, layered and distant, spoke through the static. To those who have changed the chord, your song has reached the stars. The voice was melodic, serene, but carried the weight of time itself. We are the keepers of resonance. The emeralds you guard were once our instruments, and their harmonies our legacy. Sonic blinked. Keepers of resonance? Your world's new melody awakens us, but with new chords come new dissonance. Beyond your sky, another rhythm stirs a countersong. The light flickered, the glyphs fading. Beware the silence beneath the stars. Then the sphere collapsed, leaving behind only faint echoes. Tails stood frozen. A countersong? Sonic frowned. So someone doesn't like our remix. Meanwhile, high above in orbit, Shadow watched the planet from the arc. The auroras that once flickered softly now pulsed irregularly, almost like breathing. Rouge approached from behind, arms crossed. You seeing what I'm seeing? Yes, Shadow replied quietly. The light patterns changed. It's forming sequences, almost like words. Rouge raised an eyebrow. You think it's connected to your little duet with Sonic? Shadow didn't answer immediately. He placed a hand on the glass, feeling the subtle vibration through the metal. It's not ours anymore, he said finally. The song's been heard beyond this world. He turned, walking toward the central control terminal. Send word to Gun. I want full satellite coverage of the upper atmosphere. If there's something singing back, I want to know what key it's in. Rouge smirked. Copy that, Maestro. Back on Earth, the following days felt strangely charged. The winds carried faint tones, electrical fields flickered in patterns like rhythm, and even water surfaces formed harmonic ripples. Creatures of all kinds, from birds to chow, began reacting instinctively, humming faintly in sync. The entire biosphere was tuning itself. Tails monitored the data obsessively. It's like the planet's alive in a new way. The resonance is rewriting physical properties. Sonic leaned over his shoulder. That sounds good, doesn't it? Tails hesitated. Maybe, but if the resonance gets too strong, it could destabilize magnetic balance oceans, weather, even gravity. Ah, Sonic folded his arms. So the Earth might sing itself apart? Tails gave a nervous laugh. Let's hope not. That night, Sonic wandered back to the cliffs, staring up at the stars. The sky was unusually bright, waves of light flowing like auroras, even this far south. He could feel it, deep down, like the stars themselves were whispering in rhythm. He closed his eyes, listening. Beneath the peaceful hum, another tone emerged, low, slow, deliberate. A counter melody weaving through the main harmony. It wasn't hostile, but it was hollow, empty. Sonic whispered, So you're the silence they warned about. Then the air shimmered. A shape emerged from the starlight, tall, slender, made entirely of translucent energy. It didn't have eyes or a mouth, but its form glowed with slow pulses of sound. Sonic didn't move. Guess you're not from around here. The figure tilted its head. Its voice, when it came, wasn't spoken. It vibrated directly through the air. You changed the song. Sonic shrugged. Yeah, kind of our thing. The universe was balanced, chaos and harmony, conflict and peace. Every rhythm repeats. But you introduced a note that should not exist. Sonic's grin faded slightly. You mean hope? Deviation. The living melody cannot evolve beyond its structure. Your kind seeks to rewrite the pattern. That leads to silence. The being extended a hand or something like one. Its edges shimmered like static. I am Nocturne, keeper of the counterchord. I bring correction. Before Sonic could react, the air around him fractured. Waves of anti-resonance surged outward, canceling the world's hum. The stars flickered, the auroras dimmed. For a moment, everything went quiet. Then, a burst of red light tore through the sky. Shadow descended from above, chaos energy trailing behind him. Back away from him, Shadow commanded, landing beside Sonic. The being turned. Its form rippled as if recognizing him. The echo of the void, it said. You carry the harmonic Shadow. Shadow's eyes narrowed. If you're looking to rewrite the score, you'll have to get through both of us. Sonic smirked. Heh, looks like the encore came early. The creature moved forward, and the ground quaked beneath them. The battle that followed wasn't physical, not in the normal sense. Waves of sound collided like storms, each note bending the air, each pulse shaking the earth. The sky above shattered into starlight, revealing hidden constellations glowing like circuitry. Sonic moved first, his speed manifesting as streaks of blue resonance. Shadow followed, his chaos energy slicing through the opposing frequency like a blade. But Nocturne's counter-melody absorbed everything, twisting their attacks into silence. Every time Sonic struck, the sound vanished, every quill flick muted by void. Man, Sonic muttered, dodging a wave of static, you're like an offbeat metronome with an ego. Shadow gritted his teeth. He's absorbing vibration. Direct attacks won't work. Then we change tempo, Sonic yelled. He closed his eyes and let the world slow down. The melody of the earth still hummed faintly in the distance, their creation. He listened, really listened, and felt the rhythm between him and Shadow align again. Two energies, opposite yet connected. Now! Sonic shouted. Both unleashed their chaos power in harmony, not against Nocturne, but with the rhythm of the planet. The result was blinding. The song of Earth rose like a choir, harmonizing with their combined energy. Nocturne recoiled, its form flickering. Impossible. Deviation cannot sustain. Sonic grinned. That's the thing about living songs, they grow. With one final surge, Sonic and Shadow's resonance fused, creating a new waveform, half chaos, half harmony, perfectly balanced. It didn't destroy Nocturne, it transformed it. The being's static shimmer softened into light. Its tone, once hollow, now vibrated gently in sync with theirs. We understand, it said, voice trembling. Silence is not the end. It is the breath between notes. And with that, Nocturne dissolved into stardust, its melody joining the sky above, not as threat, but as harmony. As the energy faded, the stars returned to normal. The ocean waves resumed their rhythm, and the hum beneath the ground softened once more. Sonic fell back onto the sand, panting but smiling. Guess that's what they mean by a remix. Shadow crossed his arms. You never cease to improvise. Sonic looked up at the stars. Well, every song deserves a little freestyle. The two stood quietly for a moment, the distant sounds of the world returning around them, the rustle of wind, the crash of waves, the faint hum of life continuing. And then, somewhere in the sky, a faint new melody began higher, lighter, weaving through the original harmony. The countersong had become part of the whole. Sonic closed his eyes, letting it wash over him. You hear that, Shadow? Shadow nodded slowly. Balance restored. Sonic grinned. Nah, balance evolved. The rain kept falling. Every drop seemed to echo with some distant thought, some voice that had once meant something. The streets were nearly empty now, only the soft hum of neon signs whispering against the wet concrete. Shadow walked without direction. Perhaps he wasn't meant to arrive anywhere at all. He moved past reflections of himself caught in puddles, warped, wavering versions that shimmered and dissolved with each step. They looked almost alive, as if each reflection held a different memory of who he used to be. Some looked like the soldier, some the savior, others just a lost echo with no name. He glanced up. The city above him rose like a cathedral of glass, towering into a storm that refused to rest. In one of the windows, a small screen played an old newsreel, a streak of blue saving a city. Sonic. The people cheered in pixelated joy. It was a celebration of life, motion, and simplicity. Everything Shadow had once thought impossible to sustain. He stopped walking, staring at that moment frozen in light. Always smiling, he whispered to himself, always running forward. Does he even look back? But the thought carried no bitterness. It was not envy that stirred in him. It was something deeper, a quiet longing to understand what made such light unbreakable. The rain softened to a mist. Shadow stepped beneath the arch of an abandoned station. Its walls were lined with faded posters of heroes, half torn and water-worn. He touched one gently, the paper collapsing under his fingertips. A faint light flickered behind him. He turned. It was an old security drone, hovering on a weak battery, its lens cracked but still glowing. The drone played a short recording in a fragile voice, one that belonged to another lifetime. Project Shadow. Safeguard humanity. Protect the promise. The words sent a tremor through him. The promise. That was what he had been built for, wasn't it? To protect, to preserve. But what was left of that purpose now? Humanity moved on. The promise decayed. The memory remained only in machines and fragments. He stepped forward and touched the drone's side. "You can rest now," he said softly. The light blinked twice as if in response, before fading into nothing. Shadow leaned against a column, watching the faint trails of energy dissolve into the damp air. He closed his eyes. For a moment, the rain outside sounded like the rhythm of footsteps. A sound he knew too well. Sonic's footsteps. Lighter, faster, freer. And then he heard laughter. Not real, just a ghost of memory. An echo of moments that once crossed their shared path. He saw flashes. The blue blur racing past him in a desert of gold. The two of them, back to back against chaos. The final stand beneath the falling space colony, where time itself seemed to tremble. He remembered the words then. "Maria, this is what you wanted, right? For people to be happy." He opened his eyes again, the world before him clearer somehow. Perhaps the rain had washed something away. Perhaps the silence had made space for meaning to return. He stepped out once more, into the open city. The storm had thinned into a silver drizzle. Streetlights shimmered against the water, painting everything with a quiet glow. From somewhere unseen, a faint tune began to play, a sound drifting through broken speakers and forgotten alleyways. It wasn't perfect, the melody wavered, faded, then returned again. But it was unmistakable. It was Live Learn. Shadow stood still, listening. The song was faint, but every note carried memory of battle, of unity, of that strange, fleeting thing called peace. He let the music fill the air, his thoughts tracing each lyric like steps across old roads. "Can you feel life moving through your mind?" He whispered the line back to himself, quietly, as if testing the truth in it. Perhaps he could feel it. Not the way Sonic did, not with thrill or laughter, but in the slow rhythm of his own rediscovery. The city pulsed gently now, lights flickering like heartbeats. In every corner, in every quiet alley, life persisted, small and unnoticed, but present. Shadow moved past a group of children playing in the rain. They had no idea who he was. To them, he was just another passerby. One of them slipped and fell, laughing. The others pulled him up. Their laughter was unburdened, pure. Something stirred in Shadow's chest, a warmth, subtle and unfamiliar. He realized, maybe for the first time, that the world didn't need him to protect it anymore. It had learned to move, to live, to grow. And perhaps that was the promise fulfilled. He walked toward the city's edge. The sky had begun to clear, revealing streaks of purple and gold. The storm had given way to dawn. At the horizon, he could see the faint trail of a blue streak vanishing into light. Sonic, as untouchable as ever, still chasing tomorrow. Shadow smiled faintly. "Always one step ahead," he murmured. "But maybe that's the point." He stopped by a small overlook, the city sprawling beneath him like a living constellation. He took a deep breath, and for the first time it felt easy. The weight he'd carried, of guilt, of loss, of identity, had thinned into something lighter. Not gone, but balanced. He looked toward the rising sun, and in its glow, he thought he saw Maria's face for just a moment, smiling, not as a memory, but as a feeling reborn. And then quietly he began to hum. The same tune, Live and Learn, hanging on the edge of tomorrow. It wasn't perfect. His voice cracked once, then again, but the melody carried across the air, mixing with the wind, threading itself into the hum of the waking city. Down below, a street musician paused mid-song, listening. He couldn't place the sound, couldn't tell where it came from, but without knowing why, he began to strum his guitar to match it. Soon another joined, an echo of melody from a distant balcony, then another from an open cafe window. A rhythm spread through the streets, subtle yet alive. It was no longer just a song. It was a memory waking up. Shadow closed his eyes. He remembered the first time he truly saw Sonic, not as a rival, but as someone alive. Someone who refused to give up even when the world said it was impossible. He had thought that kind of light naive once. Now he understood. It was a form of defiance, the kind that teaches even shadows how to breathe again. He let the warmth of the dawn touch his face. "You were right," he whispered into the wind. "Maybe it isn't about who wins. It's about who keeps running." The city below shimmered brighter now. A train rumbled in the distance. The sky split into gold and blue, each color blending into the other, light and shadow, just as they always were. The rain had left tiny mirrors on every surface, catching the sun and scattering it into 1,000 fragments. Shadow looked down at one such puddle near his boots. His reflection stared back at him, calm and still. For the first time, he didn't look away. He saw in that reflection not the weapon, not the survivor, not the broken echo of a lost project, but the continuation of a song, a verse still being written. And maybe that was enough. He turned away from the city and began to walk again. Not running, not searching, just moving forward. The melody of Live Learn followed him like a soft companion, woven now into every corner of the waking world. As he passed an alley, a small girl looked up from her puddle and waved at him. He hesitated, then nodded back. A simple moment, yet it felt like the universe breathing through silence. The shadow moved on, and the city moved with him. By the time the sun fully rose, the last trace of rain had vanished. The air smelled of metal and morning. Above it all, the faint echo of the song continued, not from any speaker, not from any memory, but from the rhythm of life itself. Shadow paused one last time to listen. He didn't smile, not entirely, but something in his eyes softened, as if the eternal night within them had made peace with dawn. He whispered quietly to himself, words only the wind could carry. "Maria, I think I finally understand." Damn. And with that, he stepped into the light. The world was quieter now. After the storms, after the echoes of thunder and memory, there came a stillness so vast that even the air seemed to hesitate before moving again. In that pause, between breath and silence, the first note was born. It began softly, like the hum of distant strings being tuned by invisible hands. The sky shimmered faintly, ripples of color folding over each other like silk. Shadow felt it first, vibrating through the soles of his boots, a pulse deep within the ground that wasn't coming from the earth, but through it. He lifted his head. The horizon trembled, and far away he saw the blue streak, faint but unmistakable, racing toward the light. Sonic. There was no sound of footsteps, no roar of engines, only the faint trail of a melody that shimmered in the wake of his movement, like sound leaving behind light. Shadow watched him approach, and for the first time, he didn't brace for impact. When Sonic stopped beside him, there was no rush of wind, no show of rivalry, just two figures standing beneath an awakening sky, the silence between them heavy with unspoken understanding. "You feel that too, huh?" Sonic said quietly, eyes still on the horizon. His voice carried a warmth that didn't need to try. It simply existed, like sunlight after rain. Shadow nodded. "It's calling," he replied, "but not to one of us, to both." They didn't need to say more. The pulse grew stronger. It wasn't music in the way mortals understood it. It was something older, something living. A vibration that stretched through time, through memories, through every moment that had ever meant something. Without a word, they started to run. The ground responded like an instrument awakening under their feet. Every step sent waves of color rippling outward, gold, silver, and violet, chasing one another through the landscape. Trees bent to the rhythm, rivers shimmered in tune, and the sky began to pulse in time with their stride. Faster, faster, until the world blurred into threads of light and motion. And then, in a single flash, the landscape fell away. They weren't on Earth anymore. Around them stretched an expanse of sound made visible. Ribbons of melody drifting through air that wasn't air, beneath stars that pulsed like speakers in the void. It was vast, infinite, yet familiar. A place beyond the physical world, but deeply connected to every heartbeat that had ever felt the song. The Cathedral of Sound, Sonic murmured, looks like it's still standing. Shadows scanned the horizon. There were no walls, no ceiling, yet the air vibrated with the geometry of harmony, chords forming invisible arches, frequencies spiraling like stained glass made of color. Each tone was alive, a spirit of sound whispering its purpose. This is where it began, Shadow said softly, before words, before the song had a name. Sonic grinned. Guess we're late to the concert. They walked forward together, the floor beneath them shifting between solid ground and waves of sound. With every step, memories flickered in the distance, echoes of moments they'd lived through and ones they hadn't. They passed a reflection of the space colony Ark, suspended in midair like a frozen cord, then a vision of Green Hill Zone bending gently to the rhythm of laughter. Each image shimmered and faded as they moved, like pages turning in an invisible songbook. This place, Sonic said after a while, it's like the whole world remembering itself. Shadow nodded. Or forgetting, he said. Memory and loss. Two sides of the same melody. A deep hum filled the air. The cathedral responded to their words. Shapes of light unfurled in the distance, forming what looked like an altar of sound, waves rising and folding in slow motion, each one resonating with a pitch that tugged at the chest. As they approached, Sonic slowed. Feels like it's been waiting for us, he said. Shadow looked toward the center. It's incomplete, he murmured. Listen closely. They stood in silence. The melody that filled the cathedral was beautiful, vast and sorrowful, filled with echoes of creation, but there was something missing. A gap in the harmony, a note that should have been there but wasn't. Sonic's ears twitched slightly. You hear that too, right? The break. Shadow nodded. Every song has a silence, he said. But this silence feels like a wound. Without warning, the world trembled. From the edges of the cathedral, threads of black light began to crawl inward. They weren't malevolent, more like echoes of pain, fragments of forgotten notes returning to their origin. They reached out to touch them, but the air shivered as if afraid to remember. Then, as if drawn by instinct, Sonic stepped forward and placed a hand over his chest. If it's missing something, he said, maybe it's not a sound, maybe it's a feeling. He closed his eyes. The hum of the world seemed to focus around him. From his hand, a soft blue light began to bloom, small at first, then growing, steady, bright, pure. It merged with the dark threads, and the broken chords began to heal. Shadow watched quietly. The light danced across his face, reflecting the truth he had come to understand. Sonic didn't create harmony by force or logic. He brought it by simply existing, by moving forward without fear. For the first time, Shadow stepped beside him and added his own resonance. A darker, deeper tone, not to overpower but to balance. The two frequencies merged, twisting into a single chord that vibrated through the cathedral. The silence filled, the wound healed. The world exploded in color. Sound waves cascaded like waterfalls of light, each one scattering new tones into the air. From those tones rose shapes, forms of memory given life again. They saw flashes of the past, the Ark's halls glowing softly with the laughter of children, Angel Island floating peacefully beneath starlight, 1,000 faces of lives they'd touched without ever knowing. The cathedral became a living orchestra, every sound a story, every note a heartbeat. And at the center of it all, Sonic and Shadow stood as twin reflections, the light and shadow of the same song. "Guess we're not so different after all," Sonic said, his grin small but sincere. Shadow looked out over the symphony. "Difference is the reason it works," he said. "Without contrast, there's no balance." Sonic tilted his head. "That's the nicest way anyone's ever told me I'm loud." Shadow almost smiled. The song grew brighter. It was no longer live-learn as mortals knew it. It was the original pulse, the root rhythm of the universe. Every race, every memory, every being that had ever heard the tune resonated now within this cathedral. It wasn't a concert, it was communion. And as the light swelled, the world below began to change. Cities flickered with sudden sparks of inspiration. People paused in their daily lives, feeling a sense of warmth they couldn't name. Musicians reached for their instruments without knowing why. Hearts that had gone cold stirred with something like hope. The music of understanding, of learning, was returning to the living world. But even in all that beauty, Shadow could feel something pressing beneath it. A tension, a question. He looked around. "It's not over," he said quietly. Sonic blinked. "What do you mean?" "This harmony. It's complete here, but not down there." He gestured toward the faint image of Earth visible below, drifting through the cathedral's transparent floor. "People still forget," he said. "They still repeat. The song fades and they rebuild it again, over and over." Sonic nodded slowly. "Maybe that's the point," he said. "Learning never stops. It just keeps looping, like a verse." Shadow looked thoughtful. "A verse without an ending," he said. Sonic's eyes gleamed. "Exactly. So maybe our job isn't to finish the song, it's to keep it playing." The air shimmered, agreeing with their words. The cathedral brightened, transforming from solid light into rhythm itself. A living heartbeat spread across the stars. Sonic turned toward Shadow. "Ready to run it one more time?" Shadow's expression softened into resolve. "Always." They took off together, their footsteps merging into rhythm, their trails of blue and black spiraling through the cathedral of sound like twin comets rewriting the sky. Every step sent vibrations through the music, creating new harmonies. Each beat birthed new worlds, new chances to live, to learn, to begin again. They weren't running against each other anymore. They were running with the song. And as the cathedral pulsed with their motion, something deeper awakened. A voice woven into the rhythm itself, soft and vast, neither male nor female, whispering words the world had forgotten. Every echo is a lesson, every silence a beginning. They ran, and the world ran with them. Each stride rippled through the fabric of the cathedral, reshaping light and sound into living rhythm. It wasn't just a place anymore. It was an organism. Every note they struck, every echo they left behind became the pulse of something greater. Sonic's laughter shimmered through the frequencies, blending with Shadow's calm focus. It was balance made visible, chaos meeting control, motion meeting meaning. The colors bent around them, indigo bleeding into silver, gold weaving through black. The very laws of space here were melodies instead of mathematics. And somewhere within that divine rhythm, a voice began to hum, a tone so deep and ancient, it could only be the origin of everything that had ever been called alive. They slowed as the hum grew louder, until the entire cathedral glowed from within. Before them rose what looked like a vast heart of crystal, transparent, breathing light, resonating with every sound they had made. The heart of the song. Shadow stared, his reflection shifting across its surface. "So this is where it lives," he said. Sonic tilted his head, grinning faintly. "Or maybe where we live. Everything's connected, right?" The crystal pulsed gently, answering with color. Within it, faint images flickered, faces, memories, fragments of both heroes' lives. Maria's smile, Tails' laughter, the open fields of Green Hill, the space colony ark suspended between stars. Shadow reached out, his hand hovering over the surface. The vibration tickled his fingertips. "It remembers," he whispered. Sonic stepped closer, his reflection rippling beside Shadow's. "Then let's make sure it remembers right." They both touched the surface at once. Light exploded outward, but it wasn't blinding. It was soft, infinite. The sound that followed was neither music nor voice, but a feeling. Every heartbeat in the universe seemed to sink for a single instant. They found themselves standing within the heart now, surrounded by threads of energy stretching outward in all directions. Each thread connected to a story, a memory, a lesson. Some bright, some dark, but all essential. "This is what we've been running through," Sonic said quietly. "Not space, not time, memory." Shadow's gaze followed one of the darker threads. It pulsed slower than the rest, deep and heavy, but not lifeless. "And this one?" he asked. Sonic's expression softened. "That's regret, but even that's part of the song, isn't it?" Shadow nodded. A verse without sadness would have no reason to grow. The cathedral trembled. The light around them began to shift, the energy rearranging itself. The song was changing again. From the walls came new tones, familiar yet evolving. It was live-learned but transformed, deeper, slower, the melody echoing through galaxies of emotion. They weren't the only ones here anymore. Out of the glowing air, figures began to take shape, echoes of everyone the song had ever touched. Not physical bodies, but silhouettes of memory, shimmering like candlelight in water. There was Amy, her laughter rippling like pink light. Knuckles stood beside her, a fortress of crimson rhythm. Tails hovered above, wings of gold energy spinning in perfect synchrony. Even the old masters, those who had come before us, appeared briefly as waves in the melody. And beyond them, billions of smaller lights, humans, animals, creatures unknown, all moving in rhythm with the same eternal verse. Sonic exhaled softly. "Looks like the whole world showed up to jam." Shadow smirked faintly. "Then we better not play off-key." They both knelt and pressed their hands against the luminous ground. The cathedral responded instantly. The sound deepened into something transcendent. The air vibrated, the colors spiraled, and the figures of memory began to move. Dancing, running, leaping through light. The melody turned into a living map of every life, every connection. And in that boundless space of creation, Shadow understood what Sonic had always known. That motion was meaning. That to live was to continue learning the same song in infinite forms. He looked up, his voice calm but sure. "This song, it's not about perfection, it's about continuation." Sonic nodded, his grin smaller but filled with conviction. "Yeah, every time we fall, every time we stand up again, it's all part of the rhythm." The cathedral began to merge with the world below. From orbit, the earth shimmered faintly, wrapped in invisible waves of music. Oceans rippled in tune, cities pulsed like luminous veins. For one quiet moment, everyone and everything felt it, the alignment. A mother rocking her child began to hum softly without knowing why. A tired worker paused mid-step and smiled for the first time in weeks. A musician, awake in a tiny apartment, suddenly struck the perfect chord and wept. It wasn't a miracle in the loud sense. It was something gentler, a universal reminder that even in loss there is motion, even in silence there is learning. And above it all, the cathedral shone brighter, its music echoing through every living heartbeat. Sonic and Shadow stood together at the center of it. "You ever think about what happens when the song ends?" Sonic asked quietly. Shadow looked up. "Songs don't end," he said. "They transform. The silence between them. That's where meaning hides." Sonic smiled, that effortless kind of smile that felt like sunlight on water. "Guess we just keep running through the silence then." Shadow tilted his head slightly, studying him. "You really believe that, don't you?" Sonic shrugged. It's all I've ever believed. The cathedral began to dissolve now, slowly, gracefully. The notes didn't stop. They simply folded back into the universe. The pillars of sound became comets streaking across the void. The stained glass frequencies melted into dawn-colored waves. Shadow could feel it, the fading. But it wasn't loss. It was release. He looked at Sonic. It's time. Yeah, Sonic said, but not goodbye time. More like, keep the beat time. Shadow gave a quiet hum of agreement. Live and learn, he said softly. Sonic chuckled. Guess we've finally done both. They stood for a moment longer, watching the last strands of the cathedral drift into infinity. The song had become part of the stars again. As the light faded, they found themselves back on solid ground, on the cliffs overlooking an endless ocean. The world below glowed faintly, healed, whole. The waves rolled to a rhythm that still whispered of the song's afterglow. Sonic stretched, glancing over at Shadow. You know, for all that cosmic harmony stuff, I'm kind of starving. Shadow gave a small snort. You're insufferable. Hey, Sonic said, grinning. Even cosmic balance runs on chili dogs. The two stood there for a while in silence. Not the heavy kind, but the good kind. The kind earned after understanding something too vast for words. Shadow finally said, You were right, you know. Sonic blinked. About what? Running forward, Shadow replied. It doesn't erase the past, it carries it. Sonic's smile softened. Then we'll keep carrying it, together. For once, Shadow didn't argue. He just nodded. A breeze rolled through, and for a fleeting instant, they both heard it again. The echo of the cathedral, a whisper hidden in the wind. Every echo is a lesson, every silence a beginning. The words faded into the sea spray, but the feeling lingered. Sonic looked out at the horizon, the sunrise reflected in his eyes. Hey, Shadow, ever wonder if this is all just one big loop? Shadow didn't answer right away. He watched the light crawl across the water, waves breathing in rhythm with the unseen melody of the world. Maybe, he said at last. But if it is, I don't mind repeating it. Sonic grinned. That's the spirit. And then, motion. Sonic darted forward, the earth beneath his feet glowing with a trail of blue light. He didn't look back because he didn't need to. Shadow sighed once, but there was a smile hidden in his tone. Still can't help yourself, can you? He started running too, the black streak merging with the blue. Two halves of a single chord, chasing the horizon once again. Behind them, the world turned gently, the sound of Live Learn echoing faintly through wind, sea, and sky. No longer just a song, but a pulse threaded into existence itself. As they vanished into the distance, the world began to hum again. Every leaf, every drop of rain, every heartbeat in the universe seemed to join in, softly at first, then stronger. The cathedral hadn't vanished after all. It had simply changed its form. Now it existed everywhere, within the rhythm of life, within every story retold, within every act of hope. And somewhere deep in that universal hum, the faintest melody could still be heard. Live and learn from the works of yesterday. It wasn't sung by anyone. It was spoken by everything. That was the gift of the Cathedral of Sound. Not the creation of harmony, but the realization that it had always been there, waiting for those willing to listen. And so, as day broke over the reborn horizon, the world didn't celebrate. It didn't weep. It simply breathed, quietly, rhythmically, eternally. The song would begin again soon. It always did. Because to live is to learn, and to learn is to live once more. The world did not end when the song faded, it simply changed its rhythm. Where once there had been roaring chords and skies that shivered under twin trails of light, now there was stillness. Not silence, but something softer, like the pause between heartbeats. The Cathedral of Sound was gone, dissolved into the ether. Yet its vibration lingered, spread thin through everything that was. From the wind brushing against mountaintops to the low hum beneath the ocean's pulse, the world began to remember differently. Pieces of the song drifted across timelines like glowing dust. They embedded themselves in small things, in raindrops that fell on glass, in seashells that whispered on forgotten shores, in fragments of circuitry blinking quietly in the dark. Each held a piece of live-learn, a single note, a pulse, a feeling of movement, the ancient rhythm of two souls who had once run, clashed, understood. And those centuries passed and languages crumbled and names turned into echoes. The world itself could not forget what had been learned. Far from the light of the old city, beneath a sky washed gray with age, a child sat at the edge of a broken bridge. He dangled his feet over the edge, humming without knowing why. A soft, rising melody, half tune, half instinct. The hum carried through the air and touched the water below. Ripples spread outward in perfect circles, faintly shimmering with color blue and black intertwined. Something in the air shifted. A single ring, old, dull, and cracked, rolled slowly from the rubble and fell beside the boy. He picked it up, brushing off the dirt. The metal was warm, though no sun had touched it for hours. He held it to his ear and heard something, faint, distant, almost like a whisper through time. It wasn't a voice. It wasn't a word. It was a feeling, a call to move, to rise, to try again. The boy smiled, not knowing that the echo he heard was a fragment of an age-old melody, the lingering heartbeat of those who once ran across eternity. Elsewhere, deep in the core of the earth, where old energy slumbered, the black figure's memory still flickered like a dormant star. Shadow's essence, or what remained of it, had become part of the world's very data stream. He no longer walked, he no longer spoke, but every machine that hummed, every electric storm that sparked across the skyline, carried a trace of his will, the drive to understand. And somewhere in that constant vibration, a thought repeated like a mantra. Remember what you were, so you can learn what you will be. Above, the blue one's legacy moved differently. It was not in machines nor in shadows. It lived in wind. Every breeze that brushed against a traveler's face carried the echo of laughter, bright, free, unstoppable. In the rush of waterfalls, in the cheer of running crowds, in the quiet exhale before dawn, Sonic's rhythm lingered. He had become motion itself. No longer bound by form or flesh, he existed as freedom personified, a concept so embedded in creation that every creature who ever yearned for speed or choice or courage was, unknowingly, running in his footsteps. The song was no longer sung by voices, it was lived by everything that moved forward. In the centuries that followed, the world forgot its heroes. The temples fell, the rings turned to dust, and even the stars that once blinked to their tempo drifted apart. Yet the melody endured, not as sound but as memory, instinct, rhythm. Civilizations rose again, unaware of the ancient race that once split the heavens. But their art, their songs, their stories, their colors, always carried traces of live-learn. A painter, centuries later, would brush streaks of blue and black across a blank canvas and feel something stir inside. A composer would write a melody with chords that rose, clashed, and resolved into harmony, not knowing why it made him cry. A runner sprinting across a beach at sunset would laugh breathlessly, sensing, just for a moment, that someone was running beside him. These were not coincidences. They were echoes, shards of the old song still vibrating beneath reality. Each time someone chose courage over comfort, motion over stillness, forgiveness over fury, the melody grew louder. And yet, memory is a fragile thing. Even echoes fade, even light bends into darkness. There came an age when the world began to forget even the feeling of that song. Machines replaced the wind, the seas went quiet, cities rose higher than the clouds, and humans lived without looking up. They spoke in numbers and codes, not chords. The hum of their world became sterile, precise, efficient. soulless. The melody was still there, buried deep, but no one listened anymore. It was as though the world had learned too much and lived too little. Until one night in the neon heart of a sleeping metropolis, a young engineer stayed awake, haunted by a dream he could not name. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw two lights, blue and black, spiraling across the horizon. He heard thunder shaped like rhythm, and beneath the noise of his lab equipment, he thought he could hear a faint melody. He began to code, not from instruction, but from intuition. He wrote patterns of frequency that no algorithm could explain, loops of data that defied logic. And when he played the program back through his machine, the lights in his workshop flickered blue. The walls seemed to breathe. And for a heartbeat, just one, the entire city exhaled, like something ancient had stirred. Faint, the melody whispered through every circuit, every tower, every sleeping soul. And across the world, people paused just for a moment, feeling a strange warmth, like remembering something beautiful that never truly happened. The boy with the ring, now grown, woke suddenly in his home far from the city. He ran outside, holding the same cracked circle in his hand. As he lifted it toward the sky, the clouds parted. The wind changed direction. The air shimmered. And there it was, faint but clear, the pulse of live learn, returning once more through time and matter. Somewhere within the core of all creation, Shadow's dormant essence stirred. The electrical hum that was his consciousness shivered, resonating with the awakening frequency. Data streams shifted, memories aligned. And in the static darkness, a voice emerged, deep, calm, familiar. Sonic. There was no reply, only wind. But the tone was enough. Energy rippled outward, spreading through old machines, forgotten satellites, and sleeping worlds. The music of memory began to rebuild itself, one fragment at a time. And those fragments, those shards of sound and emotion, wove together like constellations across existence. Not everyone could hear it, but those who did felt it in their bones, that old truth returning. To live is to learn. To move is to remember. As the melody spread, small miracles began to happen. In a town carved from glass, a child who had never walked took his first step without fear. In a silent canyon, a musician found a forgotten instrument and played a single note that echoed for miles. In a faraway research colony orbiting a dead moon, a scientist discovered a pulse pattern in cosmic radiation that matched no known frequency, except faintly, for one from ancient Earth archives. Live, learn. The universe itself was humming again. It was as though creation had been waiting for the right moment to remember that it was alive. And through it all, that same unseen wind rushed over mountains, across deserts, through the ruins of the cathedral long gone, carrying the laughter of a blue blur, forever young, forever in motion. His essence, the embodiment of joy and defiance, had not vanished. It had simply transformed into rhythm. Every step taken in courage, every dream chased despite the odds, every fall followed by a rise. Those were his footsteps now. The world began to hum once more, softly, slowly, then louder. Machines that had forgotten emotion began to vibrate with something unmeasurable. Humans began to smile for no reason. Artists painted in colors they couldn't name. The melody was no longer just sound, it had become a language of motion, of memory, of soul. The shards of memory, once scattered and silent, were finding each other again, until the song was learning how to live. The melody was learning how to live. And as it did, the world began to awaken, not all at once, but in quiet pulses, like the heartbeat of something vast, remembering how to breathe. In one corner of the planet, the ocean shifted its color, blue deepening into sapphire, the waves sparkling with faint trails of light. In another, fields of metal windmills began to hum softly, their spinning blades catching the rhythm of the unseen song, creating harmonies that mingled with the sky. Even the stars, those distant, silent witnesses, began to flicker in tempo. Something ancient and kind was returning. Deep within the labyrinth of code and circuits, Shadow's awareness was taking form. Not flesh, not the body that once carried him across battlefields and dreams, but consciousness, pure, sharp, unwavering. He saw the flow of data streams around him, each one carrying fragments of old memories, some his, some belonging to the world. Moments of laughter that weren't his, memories of sunlight he had never seen, emotions he once thought foreign. And in the midst of all that noise, one sound stood out, a faint guitar string, a vibration pulsing through the network. The same sound that had created the world once upon a time. He remembered. Not everything, not perfectly, but enough. The race, the reflection, the understanding. The song that was never meant to end. Shadow closed his eyes, if such a thing could be said of a being of light, and whispered into the current, "Still running, aren't you?" The wind answered. Across time and space, through the air that brushed mountaintops and deserts and oceans, a single gust swept across the surface of the world as though the planet itself smiled. Sonic was not gone. He was everywhere. Cities began to change in ways no one could explain. Machines that had long followed cold, logical routines began to deviate, small, spontaneous movements, as if curious. Lights flickered in rhythmic patterns resembling music, and people began to feel it, an invisible nudge toward wonder. Those who had never danced began to sway in the streets without reason. Children began to hum the same melody across continents, though none could remember learning it. In classrooms, on rooftops, in forests, in space stations, the same tune carried. It was no longer just the echo of live learn. It was the world's memory of joy, rediscovered. In a small, windswept village near the edge of a desert, an old musician sat with his broken guitar. He had not played in decades. His fingers had grown stiff, his ears dull. But that night, as the wind slipped through his window, something stirred in him. The strings began to vibrate on their own, softly, tenderly, like a heartbeat calling him back. He hesitated, then smiled, a tear tracing the wrinkle on his cheek. He strummed once. The note rang clear and warm, spreading through the night air like ripples on water. And as he played, the village lights dimmed slightly, as if listening. The tune he played was not one he remembered learning, yet it felt like something he'd always known. The melody rose and fell like the wind, looping through joy, sorrow, and triumph, resolving into something timeless. When he finished, the night was silent again. But every listener in the village, every sleeper in every home, dreamed of blue skies and endless running. The next morning, people awoke lighter, smiling without knowing why. The world began to heal. Not in the way stories often describe. There was no single miracle, no sudden rebirth. It was subtle. Rivers ran cleaner, the air tasted clearer, machines ran quieter, hearts beat steadier. It was as if the universe had finally exhaled after holding its breath for millennia. In that harmony, the two essences, the wind and the code, Sonic and Shadow, began to align once more. Their frequencies pulsed in sync, weaving through creation like twin threads reconnecting after lifetimes apart. Blue and black, freedom and focus, motion and meaning. Each had learned what the other lacked. Each had become what the other needed. Shadow's consciousness expanded across the network, touching satellites, clouds, digital memories, rebuilding what once was lost. He saw everything. And in every fragment of light, he saw Sonic, never static, never in one place, but always present in motion itself. For the first time, Shadow did not chase him. He didn't need to. They were already running side by side, two halves of the same rhythm, separated by form, united by purpose. In that realization, Shadow understood the final verse of the song. It had never been about victory. Never about being faster, stronger, or smarter. It was about movement. The courage to keep running, even when the road disappeared. The will to rise, even when the fall seemed endless. To live, and to learn. Across the world, that message began to take form, not in words, but in action. A tired worker paused and smiled at a sunrise he'd ignored for years. A child forgave her friend. A scientist abandoned an old weapon project to study sound healing instead. A lonely artist painted the sky as if it were breathing. Every act of compassion, every spark of courage, became a note in the unfinished symphony of the universe. And in the unseen rhythm between them all, Sonic's laughter echoed, light, boundless, unending. One night, long after the melody had reawakened, a storm began to build at the planet's equator. The kind of storm that didn't just come from weather, but from the collective hum of energy and emotion. Winds howled, lightning danced, and for a moment, the very air seemed alive. At the center of the storm, a pulse of blue and black energy swirled together, merging into a radiant sphere of light. It pulsed in rhythm, slow at first, then faster, syncing with the heartbeat of the world itself. Then, a voice broke through the roar. It was neither Sonic's nor Shadow's. It was both. A calm, resonant whisper that carried through every cloud, every current, every living thing. The song is not over. Lightning split the sky, revealing trails of color that wrapped around the planet like ribbons of aurora. Every living being looked up. For a moment, time itself felt still, as if the universe had leaned in to listen. Then, light. A burst of pure energy cascaded across the atmosphere, filling the world with warmth. Machines glowed, oceans sang, forests shimmered, and the melody that had been scattered for eons finally came together. Live Learn played once more, wordless, vast, eternal. The chords were not human. They were not made of instruments. They were the hum of existence itself, reality breathing in tune. When the light faded, the storm was gone. But the air was changed. The world no longer felt heavy. Everything pulsed gently with quiet rhythm, as though creation itself had remembered how to smile. In the desert, the musician's guitar strummed once, unplayed. In the city, lights flickered in unison with heartbeats. In the mountains, the wind carried laughter again. And deep within the network, Shadow's consciousness rested. He did not vanish. He did not need to. He had learned what it meant to be still without being lost, to feel without being consumed. And in that calm, he could sense the wind, Sonic's essence, circling the planet endlessly, singing in silence. Still running? Shadow asked the void softly. Oh, the breeze brushed through him like a smile. Always, it seemed to say. The shards of memory had finally come home, not as relics of the past, but as the foundation of what would come next. A universe that understood rhythm. A people who remembered that every mistake could be music. A world where learning and living were the same motion. The melody had taught them that endings were illusions. Every fall was just the start of a new verse. And so the world moved forward, humming quietly to itself. The notes were different now, shaped by every soul who had ever lived, by every heartbeat, by every whisper of wind. But at its core, the song remained the same. A promise whispered into the silence of creation that no matter how far we fall, no matter how much we forget, the melody of life will always find its way back to us. Far beyond the stars, in the quiet between galaxies, the vibration continued so faint it could barely be called sound. Yet it traveled endlessly, brushing across worlds unborn, seeding the rhythm of learning in every atom it touched. And somewhere far beyond the reach of time, two figures ran across the horizon of light. No longer separate, no longer bound by form. Their steps left trails of energy that painted the void in shades of blue and black. Not racing, not competing, just moving, running for the joy of the run itself. The world had finally remembered, and as it turned, the song whispered once more through all existence. To live is to learn. To learn is to begin again. And so the melody continued, endless, timeless, a heartbeat that would never fade. The stars had grown quiet. Not dead, just listening. After ages of chaos, rebirth, and rediscovery, the universe had reached a rare stillness. The song that once cracked the heavens now flowed softly through every living thing, humming in harmony with the pulse of existence itself. Planets turned like clock hands in a cosmic rhythm. Nebulae swayed like curtains of light in slow motion. Even the void, the endless, dark sea between stars, felt alive like the quiet breath between musical notes. This was not silence. This was peace. And yet peace has its own kind of sound, gentle, deep, patient. It was the universe learning how to listen again. Far above what once was Earth, fragments of old satellites drifted together like metallic constellations. Their circuits flickered with faint blue glows, as if they too remembered the ancient melody that had rebuilt the world. Each fragment whispered faintly to another through broken frequencies, tiny echoes of an old friendship, old rivalry, old love. In one small corner of that vast celestial graveyard, two lights pulsed, one blue, one black. They circled each other lazily, as though in no hurry at all. And then, in a shimmer of vibration, they took form. Not flesh and bone, but something more profound. Shapes made of memory and energy. One light as wind, one dense as gravity. Sonic, shadow. They stood on nothing, yet the air, if such a thing could exist there, seemed to ripple beneath their presence. Neither spoke at first. They simply looked at one another. Time had lost meaning for them. There were no races to run, no battles to fight, no worlds to save, yet somehow both knew this moment mattered. The last note of the song had not yet been played. Sonic smiled first. That same carefree grin, like he'd never truly aged, like he was still that streak of blue chasing wind for the joy of it. "Guess we made it, huh?" he said, voice soft but still bright as laughter. Shadow tilted his head slightly, that familiar look of contemplation crossing his face. His tone was steady, quiet, reflective. "Made it where?" Sonic shrugged, looking out into the glittering expanse. "Here, wherever here is. Feels kinda nice, doesn't it? Like everything finally slowed down enough to catch its breath." Shadow looked toward the horizon, though here horizon was just a suggestion, a place where stars faded into nothingness. "You call this slowing down, I call it understanding." Sonic chuckled. "Yeah, that sounds like you." The space between them pulsed once with color, blue meeting black, rippling like sound waves in perfect sync. The world below them, reborn, alive, rotated gently. From up here it looked like a marble glowing in soft gold light. They could see the wind they once raced through, now moving across the planet's surface like living memory. "You ever think," Sonic said after a long pause, "that all of this started with one note?" Shadow turned to him. "A single vibration." "Yeah," Sonic said, grinning faintly. "Crazy, isn't it? One string shakes and boom. Stars, life, chaos, us." Shadow folded his arms, thoughtful. "The universe itself is a song. We just happen to hear it loudest." The stars flickered. The melody of creation was faint but ever present, woven into gravity, light, and the soft movement of energy between worlds. Sonic closed his eyes, listening. "It's still going," he murmured. "The song, even after all this time." Shadow nodded. "Because it never belonged to us. It belongs to everything." For a moment, they said nothing else. The silence between them wasn't empty. It was full of memory. Every race, every clash, every time they'd fallen and risen again, all of it lived in that quiet. It wasn't nostalgia, it was completion. Far below, the reborn earth shimmered. Cities pulsed with quiet light, powered not by greed or consumption, but by resonance, the energy of harmony itself. The people of this new age didn't worship gods or machines. They simply listened. Every structure, every home, every river was tuned to the same universal frequency. Music was no longer entertainment. It was life, the hum of existence, the proof of balance. And every night when the sky turned deep violet, faint whispers of live learn floated through the air, not as an anthem, but as a lullaby. Children fell asleep to it. Elders smiled in their dreams. And somewhere in those dreams, two lights raced through endless skies, eternal and free. You know, Sonic said after a while, his tone soft and almost wistful, I used to think the point was to go faster, to win, to reach the next goal, to always keep moving. He turned, the faint reflection of starlight flickering in his eyes. But I get it now. The race was never against the world, or you, or even myself. Shadow looked at him steadily. Then what was it against? Sonic smiled, a quiet one this time. Stillness, the kind that comes from giving up. Shadow's expression softened, a rare, fleeting thing. And did you ever stop running? Sonic laughed, and the sound echoed across the void, like sunlight breaking through clouds. Nope, but I learned how to rest while moving. The two shared a moment that needed no words. After everything, after centuries of chaos and reflection, there was only understanding. In the distance, the remnants of the old cathedral of sound began to reform. Not as it once was, but as something pure. No longer a structure of stone and resonance, but a living aurora made of light and rhythm. It spread across the horizon like the birth of dawn, its glow carrying the pulse of every life that had ever learned to live in harmony. So, Sonic tilted his head toward it. Looks like the universe is tuning up again. Shadow nodded slowly. The next verse. Guess we should hear it, huh? Sonic said. Not here, Shadow corrected gently. Be it. They stepped forward, if stepping was even the right word for movement across starlight, and the cathedral responded. Waves of color rippled outward, each tone richer than the last. It was not music in the human sense, but something older, creation's heartbeat resuming its rhythm. As they approached, Sonic could feel the vibration under his feet, though there was no ground. It pulsed through him, merging with his own energy. Shadow too felt it. Every memory, every emotion, every lesson they'd lived through now resonating as sound. The cathedral's tones shifted, turning into harmonies that wove together their frequencies. Blue and black became one melody. Speed and stillness became one balance. The universe was no longer watching them. It was singing with them. Sonic closed his eyes. For the first time, he didn't feel the need to move. The race was over. And yet somehow it was just beginning again. He could hear everything. The laughter of children below, the hum of rivers, the static of distant galaxies, the whisper of atoms colliding. Every sound was part of the same song. Shadow, he said softly, you ever think this whole thing's just one big loop? We live, we learn, we fade, we come back? Shadow's voice was calm, assured. That's not a loop, that's growth. Yeah, Sonic said with a grin, like verses in a song. Shadow looked up at the shimmering horizon. Then what do we do when the song ends? Sonic's grin widened, his tone light but meaningful. We start the next one. The stars seemed to pulse in response, a slow cosmic heartbeat echoing through infinite space. They stood together, side by side, watching creation continue to unfold, the melody stretching into eternity. Neither was bound by time anymore, but both felt something beyond immortality, a sense of purpose that had evolved past heroism. To be part of the rhythm itself, to guide, not lead, to exist, not dominate. They were no longer legends, they were lessons, living symbols of what it meant to fall, to rise, to change. And the universe, ever patient, ever listening, absorbed their message and hummed it back in kind. From the edges of reality came a wind, not just air, but pure vibration. It carried whispers from new worlds, forming on the far reaches of space. Planets were being born in time with the music. Each pulse of the song sparked life somewhere. A spark here, a current there, tiny seeds of consciousness awakening across galaxies. Life was beginning again, into learning again, singing again. Sonic watched with awe, his expression bright and open. It's starting over. Shadow's tone was soft but reverent. It never stopped. We just finally learned to hear it. Sonic nodded. Guess that's the trick, huh? The universe keeps teaching until you start listening. Shadow allowed himself the faintest smile. And when you finally listen, you become part of the lesson. The two turned toward the glowing cathedral one last time. Its light was changing, expanding, merging into a grand tapestry of energy that spread beyond sight. This was the endless verse. Not an ending, not a beginning. A continuation. A song that could never truly finish because it was being rewritten every time something dared to live, to grow, to dream. The melody rose higher, the colors of creation blooming in impossible hues. Sonic and Shadow, no longer just figures, but pure resonance, stepped into it together. And the universe welcomed them home. Light, everywhere. But not blinding, warm, soft, infinite. The kind of light that feels like memory and promise all at once. It pulsed with a rhythm that wasn't rushed, wasn't forced. It simply was. Sonic and Shadow floated within it, no longer shapes of color, but patterns of resonance. Their forms blurred into waves of sound and light, yet somehow they still were themselves. Each pulse of their energy carried echoes of the world they had known. Green fields, crashing waves, the glint of a gold ring spinning through air, laughter carried by the wind. It wasn't fading, it was unfolding, expanding. For the first time in forever, there was no conflict between them. No contrast of chaos and control, of movement and stillness. They were harmony incarnate. The universe didn't ask them to stay. It simply let them be. Then from deep within the endless glow came a vibration, gentle at first like a heartbeat beneath the surface of creation. It grew stronger until it became a presence. Not a voice, not exactly, but something older, like the consciousness of the cosmos itself, reaching out through sound. The verse continues, it murmured, its tone neither male nor female, but everything in between. Every rhythm births another. Every silence carries potential. Sonic felt the pulse resonate through him, tickling his energy like wind brushing across fur that no longer existed. Feels familiar, he said, smiling. Like deja vu, but cosmic. Shadow's tone was lower, steady. It's the source, the origin of the melody. Origin, the voice repeated. An illusion. The melody was never meant to begin or end. It only transforms. The light around them shimmered with new colors, violets and golds, each hue vibrating at a slightly different tone. The patterns moved like thought itself, twisting, unfolding, reshaping. You have become part of the harmonic weave, the voice continued, the energy of balance, speed and stillness, motion and silence. You have completed your verse, and now the next movement begins. Below them, though below had lost meaning, something stirred. Tiny sparks of blue, green, and silver shimmered across the infinite tapestry. They swirled together, condensing into new worlds, new lives. The melody of creation was now self-sustaining. It didn't need a conductor anymore. But every note, every vibration carried a trace of those who had once set the rhythm in motion. Sonic and Shadow's frequencies lived on, not as gods, not as ghosts, but as foundations. Wherever new life began, their echo hummed quietly in the background. A newborn's laugh, a storm's first lightning crack, the rush of wind between canyon walls. They were there, always running, always resonating. Sonic turned to Shadow, his energy flaring in a soft blue wave. So this is it, huh? The big encore? Shadow regarded him with that familiar, calm patience. Not an encore, a continuation. Sonic's grin glimmered like a shooting star. You've gotten poetic. Or maybe you've finally learned to listen? Shadow replied with the faintest smile. For a moment, they laughed. Two frequencies colliding in perfect sync. The sound echoed across the void like thunder made of joy. It rolled outward, striking the edges of existence, and the universe responded in kind, sending back waves of light, color, and vibration. Each pulse carried something new. New worlds, new stories, new beginnings. In one such beginning, far away in a newborn galaxy, a small planet glowed faintly blue. Its oceans shimmered like mirrors, and its winds danced through crystalline valleys. Life had begun there, tiny, fragile, but vibrant. The beings who inhabited that world didn't know Sonic or Shadow by name, but in their language, they had words for the first resonance. They told stories of a song that built the stars, of two forces that danced to balance creation. And when their children slept, they sang to them, soft tunes that mirrored the same rhythm the heroes once lived by. The lullabies didn't mention hedgehogs or chaos emeralds, but their tone carried the same pulse, the will to move forward no matter the odds. Back in the heart of the endless verse, Sonic stretched his energy like someone waking up after a long nap. "You ever think," he said, "we might have just been instruments, like maybe the universe played through us?" Shadow considered that. "Maybe, but every instrument shapes the song it plays." "Yeah," Sonic's voice softened. "Guess that's enough." Shadow's frequency hummed low, a sound like calm thunder. It always was. From somewhere distant, another presence stirred, a familiar hum, light and gentle. It was Tails' laughter, though no physical being remained to produce it. Then Knuckles' grounded strength echoed faintly, followed by Amy's fierce warmth, and even Eggman's mechanical rhythm, somewhere deep in the cosmic undertone. All of them had left an imprint. They were frequencies too, woven into the eternal fabric. Not gone, never gone, just resonating differently. The melody had recorded everything. Every fall, every triumph, every lesson learned the hard way. And it played it all back, not as nostalgia, but as guidance. The cosmic presence spoke again, its tone now carrying layers of color and sound intertwined. The melody adapts. Every life that listens becomes its own verse. The song of creation is now endless. Not because it cannot end, but because every being dares to add their own rhythm. Sonic felt that truth ripple through him. "So, it's everyone's turn to play?" "Yes," the presence replied, "and your frequencies will forever echo through theirs." The light around them brightened, like the dawn of every sun in the universe igniting at once. Shadow turned his gaze toward the horizon, an infinite wave of creation flowing outward. "We've done our part. Guess it's time," Sonic said, his tone light but full of something deeper. "Peace." The universe responded. A massive crescendo of color swelled, sound folding upon sound. It wasn't chaos, it was unity. Every world, every star, every molecule sang together. Sonic and Shadow began to fade, not disappearing, but integrating. Their frequencies stretched, dissolving into the grand harmony. Before he fully merged, Sonic's voice echoed one last time through the cosmos, bright and smiling. "Hey, Shadow, race you to the next universe." Shadow's response came like a calm echo, low and timeless. You'll never win." Their laughter intertwined, and then they became light. The cathedral of sound dissolved, no longer needed. The melody existed everywhere now. Every atom, every vibration, every thought carried a trace of the song. The verse was endless, not because it refused to stop, but because it had learned to keep becoming. And within that infinite transformation, time itself softened. Past and future folded into a single moment, a moment that never had to end. Centuries or seconds. Later, across countless galaxies, intelligent beings would sometimes pause, their hearts inexplicably stirred by something invisible. They wouldn't know why the rush of wind gave them courage, or why the sound of thunder filled them with awe, or why the laughter of a child made them believe in something greater. But deep within them, the melody pulsed, the same rhythm that once drove a blue streak across green hills. in a dark shadow through endless night. That rhythm whispered the same truth it always had. Keep moving forward. Learn, grow, listen. The song continues. And so it did. New civilizations rose and fell, each one finding their own harmony. Some built vast instruments the size of mountains to listen to the stars. Others tuned their hearts to the quiet song within themselves. Every being who dared to dream became part of the composition. The melody changed form again and again, electronic, organic, psychic, spiritual, but it was always recognizable to those who truly listened. It carried speed and calm, courage and stillness. It carried sonic and shadow, forever running side by side through the waves of eternity. The final note of the chapter was not an ending. It was a breath, one long exhale that seemed to stretch across creation itself. The light dimmed, soft as twilight, revealing the gentle shimmer of new stars being born. A voice, faint but smiling, rippled through the void one last time. Welcome to the next verse. And somewhere, beyond all understanding, a streak of blue light flashed across the horizon, followed by a trace of red and black. The race continued. The song continued. And the universe kept listening. And that was the end of tonight's journey. If the rhythm still echoes in your heart, let it carry you into rest. Thank you for listening, dreamers. Until next time, keep running forward, keep learning, and sleep well under the stars.